Hey, this is Paul Filicetti. Jim McDonald's trying to get in on his cell phone. Can someone please let him in?
Hi. Yeah. Thank you. I didn't notice.
Yes. Thank you.
And I will make you a co-host.
Soraya, could you let Jen in also? I mean, I know you've got like 10 folks there, but Jen's out there too. Thank you.
Who is the phone number ending in 402?
That might be Jim and Jim's phone number ending in 402.
Yeah.
Just give us a nod if that's you, Jim.
Yeah, Jim, you're muted.
He may be doing a doubled up process because of the phone. So we might need the phone to go with Jim.
Would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press star 6 to unmute.
But I'm getting the
We did hear you through your computer, I think, that time. Can you speak?
You can hear me now?
You
Oh,
can
then
hear
I'll turn off the phone. You okay? Okay. Except now I can't hear you guys.
I don't know that anybody talked. Can you hear me?
And nobody really said anything. You okay? No?
No. Shoot.
Hear me?
That's why I have to use my phone because I can't hear you guys with that. Let me check again.
I know where you are, Steve.
Yeah, it's kind of a telltale. Okay.
Jim, are you on again? Can you hear us? Perhaps not.
So, Paul, are we ever going to see you?
I don't have a camera on this computer. I can see you, Ken.
Not fair.
If I had a camera, I'd say yes. Can you hear us, Jim?
Unmute yourself, Jim.
still muted.
I think that Jim is in if he's a 402 number, then he's in the attendees list. So Soraya, there you go.
Okay,
Oh,
Might-
good, okay.
Some meeting.
Jim, can you hear us?
yep, I can hear you now.
Okay, awesome, all right.
There we go.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
In notes?
It's 6 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order.
Okay.
And
We're on. And
this is Paul Felicetti. I'm sorry, I don't have anything specific to read to kick off the meeting, so we'll just kind of jump right into the agenda. I have to leave at about 5 minutes to 7, so with your permission, I would like to rearrange the agenda just a little bit. Because we have that item number 5.1, I think is a discussion item that could take a little bit longer. Well, that'll help me. Which we were going to reorder the meeting to move chair and.
yes, that's right. To move the consideration of a new HPC chair and vice chair, that's 5.3 and 5.4 to the front of the agenda if there's no objections.
No objections? Okay. All right, so then let's talk about that. Let's talk about electing a new HPC chair. The term is for 1 year, beginning immediately. And would anyone like to nominate anyone? Or nominate yourself, perhaps?
So do you have any interest, Paul?
I do have interest, I don't have time. That's I don't mind taking the co-chair position, vice chair position, but I don't feel I can commit to the chair position.
Okay. And how about you, Kent? Because
Yeah, Paul and I had this discussion,
okay.
and yeah, I'm honored to be considered, but I'm still a freshman. Haven't even completed my first year on the commission, and being a one-man office, I don't really have the backup in terms of additional help on things. So I'm more than happy to help out wherever I can, but not as chair.
Well, with that in mind, everyone I know is excited to jump into the chair position. I would like to ask Jim McDonald. Jim, would you take on the chair position?
Oh, I'd rather not for a while here because of, well, you know, Paul, but
Yeah, that's fair.
it's
That's
good.
fair.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't.
And just so everyone knows, I reached out to Kathy and spoke with Kathy as well. And I think we all know that, Kathy, your position is you're gone frequently in the summer months, and it's just not appropriate. So that leaves the rest of you to decide, please.
Well, I'm reticent to do that for the same reason you are, is this is just a really busy time, and I don't know how much time I'd have to commit to it.
But Steve, you still have some backup there in the office.
Yeah, but I'm the guy that's behind. Sean
And
is
Leif and Patrick,
behind. I'm the guy that's behind.
And Leif and Patrick, do you feel that either one of you would be prepared to step up to be a or have the commitment to be in a chair position?
No, I'd like to get some more experience before becoming the chair in the second
Okay.
meeting I have with the commission. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how it all works and stuff, so.
Yeah, I would agree. I would like to get my feet a little bit, get my feet wet a little bit before committing to a chair position.
That's totally fair. I appreciate your honesty there. I understand it. So then, how about if we look at a vice chair? Again, I'm not prepared. Yeah. Then that leaves the chair position open.
Well, Paul, this is Ken. Vice chair would be fine for occasional chairing and backup, but not as chair.
Okay.
Well, do we have the ability to have co-chairs to split the load?
I think you probably want to stay in the, in the bylaw kind of framework. I could look at what that's called. It's traditionally a chair and vice chair, but you can think about it as co-chairing. I mean, if two vice chairs might make a chair,
Well, I think you're right. We need to look at the bylaws. And I don't recall the bylaws ever saying, there was a chair sharing agreement.
I would agree with that. So in the interest of time for tonight, I'm going to suggest that we table this discussion on both item 5.3 and item 5.4, knowing that we still have a little bit of homework to do and deep contemplation for each one of us to think about being the chair to the Historic Preservation Commission or vice chair. Okay. I don't believe we need to vote on that, tabling something. I think we can just move on from there. Okay, we're moving on. All right, thank you. Then I'm sorry, we should have started with a roll call, so I'll turn to staff to do a roll call.
Okay, 1 minute, sorry, that page is loading. Jamie Ryan Lockman is absent. Steve Adler.
Here?
Kathy Baconhauser. Here. Paul Felicity.
Here.
Bruce Harrelson is absent. James McDonald.
Here.
Lee Frederickson.
Here.
Patrick Swart.
Here.
And Kent Watson.
Here.
That's it. Thank you.
And just for the record, we do have a quorum, so. All right, with that in mind, approval of the minutes. I believe they were distributed on the website. Are there any comments or corrections?
I move their approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposed? All right, thank you very much. We're good to go there. And I'm sorry, I've lost my agenda.
Public comment.
Public comment, thank you, Kent. Is there any public comment?
Here's we have none. No problem.
Soraya, would you put up the slide for people to call in if they want to? Can you go to the next slide?
So anyone who would like to participate or make a public comment, here are some instructions. We'll give you a moment. Okay. I don't believe anyone has joined us. Is that a correct, is that a fair statement as far as staff's concerned?
Right, this is Laval again, and there are 4 attendees for the meeting that might be associated with the first item on the agenda, the presentation. So, we could start with, bringing Joanna across. I know Jamie Urbacher is here as well. They could maybe help to identify other attendees. Or you could, let's start with Joanna and then she can bring others in if that would be all right.
Thanks, Laval. I think that's great.
Okay, and then as far as it's your meeting, but Jen will just do a brief introduction for the item 5.1 that's on your agenda as new business. Whenever you're ready, Paul.
Yes, I'm still struggling to find my agenda. So if you don't mind, Laval, if you could introduce that, I apologize.
Sure. Soraya, could you take the slide down again? That's better. We can all see each other. And can you bring Joanna across as a panelist? And yeah, so she just raised her hand as well.
Okay.
And then Jen Gress was going to just briefly introduce this project. What we're talking about is under new business, item 5.1. And briefly, maybe before Jen introduces it and then hands it over to this design team, Joanna, who else in the as attendees should we be bringing in as panelists? You're muted right now.
There we go. We've got Doug Newby and David Hoffman, and all 3 of us speaking would be awesome.
Okay. So Soraya's working on that, bringing David Hoffman into as a panelist as well. Thank you. There, we have everybody now. Okay. First off, Jen was just going to say a few words and then hand it over to the team, and there will be some screen sharing effect and stuff like that. So Jen, take it away. Jen, we can't hear you now.
How's that? Now can you hear me? Okay, great. Sorry. So as Laval was saying, our first presentation tonight will be given by the team from Trace Birds. This company has been hired to look into repurposing the old post hospital at Fort Missoula. This is an early discussion. For some context, we've added background material, including the National Historic Registry listing for Fort Missoula, some design guidelines that were established quite a while ago, but are still applicable today. It would be the Appendix A section. And then the zoning standards for the Fort Missoula Historic District overlay. And because these sites are within the overlay district, at some point in the future, should a project go forward, the HPC would be tasked with reviewing a historic preservation permit for the site. But for tonight, Trace Birds would like to have a discussion with the commission regarding possible future uses of the post hospital, as well as possible uses on the parcel to the northwest of the hospital. And the team will provide some background and will be interested in your responses to the 3 questions shown on the agenda, which are noted under item 5.1. So Joanna, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, is it possible for me to screen share? All right.
Are you able to find that?
I found the screen share button. I'm trying to find my, oh, there we go. The correct screen. All right. All right, is that viewing for everyone as a presentation? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, we're Trace Birds. I'm Joanna, and with me is David Hoffman and Doug Newby, both architects at Trace Birds. Just a little background on us. We're a design build firm, architect-led design build firm based in Denver. We were started in 2000, so been around for about 20 years. And our work is primarily on the Front Range of Colorado, but we've done work across the country and a few projects internationally as well. So I'm going to give a quick introduction to some of our projects. We've done about 80 projects, and more than half of those have been reclamation work. So let's see. This first one was originally, it was a 140-year-old police horse barn building. And it had been abandoned. So this first image shows the existing building. Second image shows our reclamation of it. So from the exterior, it was pretty minimal, mostly preservation. On the interior, we focused on keeping and exposing the existing structure, as well as bringing daylight deep into the space. Second project is called Steam on the Plat. It was an old factory, 100 years old. It was a soap factory, and then it was a rag recycling facility. This one, we were also able to keep the existing structure and the facade, and we gave it a new life by building an exterior wall inside of the old exterior wall. So you can see in the bottom left picture, created this breezeway between the two spaces. And then we also focused on keeping aspects of the building that we thought were important to the history of the building itself. So there's this elevator hoistway, and you can see a before and after picture of that. It became the new entry to the building. This is a project that's finishing up this summer. It's on the North Plat River in Denver, which for a long time has been an industrial zone with no community connection to the river. This project, we took some abandoned warehouses on the site and partially deconstructed them. So we're going to keep 2 parts of this warehouse building. You can see on the bottom left, there's 2 building components left, and then we've opened up the center. And this is going to be the entrance to a new park that will connect the community to the river. And then we've also brought in some public art components as well. So when we talk about Fort Missoula, this is just so you guys know the parcel that we're going to be talking about. So the highlighted area in red includes the post hospital, the nurses' quarters next to it, the shed that is just behind the nurses' quarters, and then some of the land to the west over towards the Child Development Center. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our process. Trace Birds and WGM in Missoula have met with 15 different stakeholder groups in the past few weeks before the holidays. And we've kind of broken these groups into 3 categories. There have been municipal groups, so people from the city. We've met with the Montana State Historic Preservation Office. We've met with Laval and Jen. We've met with the Missoula County Commissioners. I'll pull this up. This is just some some feedback we got, quotes we pulled from the community groups. The second kind of group of stakeholders we spoke with were the Fort Missoula Historical Museum, Northern Rockies Heritage Center, Rocky Mountain Museum of Military History, Forest Service, Childhood Development Center, and University of Montana. Those we all kind of consider direct neighbors to the site. And then the third group we're calling community groups. They're sort of the larger Missoula community. So a group called Preserve Historic Missoula, Save the Fort, Target Range Homeowners Association, Two Rivers Neighborhood Council, and then the Target Range School Board are all part of that sort of larger group surrounding the fort. So what we did, we had a meeting with each of those groups. We asked them about the history of the fort, their experience with the fort, what they would like to see, and then their feelings on development within the fort. And this is kind of our distilling of the information as much as you can distill qualitative data into a graph, but this shows the municipal groups, the neighbors, and the community groups, kind of where they land in terms of how dense new development should be on the site. So the y-axis shows the density, and then the x-axis shows how historically accurate to the original fort should new buildings be. So you can see where everyone kind of falls here. The other thing we polled people on was potential future uses for the park. So overall, it was, we heard from a lot of people that the open space is important. So this park landscape, preserving some of that is really important. And these were both uses for the post-hospital building itself and potential new buildings on site. So it sort of gave us an idea of where people were landing. So these are our kind of overall takeaways from our stakeholder meetings. This idea that the fort is kind of an escape from the city. It's on the outskirts of Missoula. It's a great place for recreation, active and passive. It's really celebrated for its open space, its public nature. You can walk anywhere. Some people described it as a lowercase d democratic space. It's also celebrated for its rich history, which is important when thinking about new development. Any new development would have to be compatible with the original design. And we heard from various groups that this doesn't mean mimicking the original designs, but remaining subservient to them, especially to the hospital building on our site in particular. The hospital building itself does need renovation. But it would have to be done in sort of a careful preservation way. And we'll talk more about that too. The exterior of the hospital is the most essential compared to the interior, is what we heard from most groups. In terms of density on the site, lower density is preferred. We heard from employees and staff within the fort that there's a lack of food and drink in the area that people can walk to during the workday. Most community members would be uncomfortable with late night attractions. So we heard a bar open all night is definitely not something that people would be excited about. Some of the concerns were the road conditions and the traffic throughout the fort. And then the fact that there is a little bit of invisible history at the fort that's sort of not talked about in the history museums. That's particularly the Black and Indigenous history. That has some potential to be embraced here. I'm going to pass it over to Dave or Doug. Who wants to?
You guys hear me? I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So in addition to these stakeholder meetings that we had as out-of-towners from Denver, we also had to wrap our mind around what the municipal process was going to be and how we move towards potential development. WGM has helped us out quite a bit with that. But just as part of that, we wanted to go through, we've looked at our understanding. 1993 was the last time this neighborhood's plan was established. And we also know that the current zoning of the property doesn't allow for a lot of uses that may be things that we want to talk about going forward into the future. So we do understand we are going to have to, the current zoning allows for a PUD, and in order to try to get approval for that PUD going through the different steps, sort of the biggest, most important thing is showing how we're going to support the Fort Missoula plan with any proposed development. So just want to click through a couple slides here. Joanna, if you go to the next one. Our takeaway from, and I feel like this is supported by what we heard from some of these stakeholders, is that Fort Missoula is really, it's an important open public amenity for the city. And besides just Fort Missoula, the historic core, we've also heard, we talked to the University of Montana, several of the county commissioners, lots of different groups, and we heard that there's this notion that this area along the Bitterroot River has the chance to become a real Blueway regional recreational park area for the city and serve the entire municipal area. And that the valley has really been, growing over the last decades, and the chances to really preserve these open areas are dwindling as more development happens. So there's really still an opportunity here with all of these different landowners, Fort Missoula being one of those, and then sounded like the city was, we hear this regional park is recently opened. Everybody seems really excited about that. And then the prospects of, I believe, the Knife River ponds were recently, like within the last couple of months, acquired by the city. And also, again, to kind of promote this idea of this area being this regional park. Next slide. So our big takeaway, the Fort Missoula neighborhood plan, the real goals there are the preservation of the unique characters of the site. And there's really, the plan talks about three things. There's a unique ecology there with the Bitterroot River and Lolo National Forest and some of these outdoor recreational type spaces. There's a more purely recreational open space piece to this, which I feel like is currently being supported by the new recreation park with the ball fields and maybe some future development. And there's also this historical piece. And all three of those are what the plan is really saying. That's the unique character when you put all three of those together: ecology, recreation, and history. It's a unique mix of things to the Missoula Valley. And any PUD that's going to be approved needs to support the preservation and enhancement of that kind of mission. So on our site in particular, these, I think it's roughly 4 acres, we are talking about the post hospital. So we want to click through a couple slides of just our understanding, particularly the historical architectural context and what we're dealing with. So post-hospital mission revival style, looking through some other buildings on the site, we actually feel like this is a very unique building for Fort Missoula. Across A Street, I believe it is Heritage Hall. While a lot of these buildings have a similar color palette of this sort of white exterior walls and the red terracotta roof, the actual turn of the century architectural styles that are used are a little bit eclectic at Fort Missoula. So go to the next slide. Officers Row, for instance, again, we still have these same sort of color palette, but there's a bit of Queen Anne revival in here, some mission revival, a little colonial revival. And so looking at these in total, we realize we've had these stock of buildings from 1910 to 1917. that make up the core of what people think of the historic core. But what's really tying them together, if you go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. There is a piece, so development in the fort has happened in kind of waves. There was this 1910 to 17 piece where the fort was actually rebuilt. Not a whole lot of built remaining buildings from the previous period, from 1877 when the fort was established to that 1910 period. But there was this period, Great Depression era, pre-World War II, where there was this overlay of kind of more vernacular buildings. So we've got kind of two things going on. We've got these sort of turn of the century revival style buildings in this white and terracotta red roof core, and then peppered in there, much lower slung, we feel like more subservient and not high revival styles, is this overlay of this civilian conservation corps buildings. Generally long, horizontal, low slung, gable roofs. I think they're usually like green roofs and white wood siding. So those two kind of eras make up the built environment at Fort Missoula. And the point I was going to, I think the next slide, if you go to that, Joanna, what really ties this whole thing together, there is this kind of city beautiful landscape with these, alley lined boulevards and these big green lawns. And I feel like this is supported by the stakeholders that we talk to. What really makes this place special for a lot of them, again, is this sort of feeling like you can come here and this is a sort of public amenity where you can walk around and there's not a lot of fences, there's not a feeling of private ownership here. And it's really this landscape that ties sort of these eclectic architectures together into a holistic, sort of understandable space. Next slide. So layering the neighborhood plan sort of on top of what we've heard from stakeholders, we had some conclusions that we took away from both of those efforts that we brought to the developer who's acquired this land. Said, after everything we've looked at and really trying to get to know what the process is going to be for the PUD and talking to various stakeholder groups, really getting into the neighborhood plan, here's the conclusions that we've come to that are going to be really important for a successful project that's going to really be a success, supporting the neighborhood plan, getting PUD approval, and allowing hopefully a new use for the post hospital to be developed and restore that building for future preservation. So just a couple of those conclusions. Obviously, the building exterior at the post hospital, we're not going to propose any additions to that. We're not talking about adding on to it, changing windows or adding windows or anything like that. Feel like it's one of the most important buildings there and just needs to be preserved. Same with the immediate grounds of the hospital. As we said, we understand that the landscape is actually a very critical part to people's understanding and appreciation of this site. So the areas immediately around the hospital, saying those should be restored and preserved. And so those sort of two things, the hospital itself and the immediate grounds, we're going to try to find a new use for it, but we're not going to make any major changes there. Then in terms of the overall site, we do think it's fundamental, both in what, a lot of the various landowners around here are wanting, what we've heard from stakeholders, what we feel like the opportunities for on the Missoula Valley floor. The fort really needs to be a public park. It's one of Missoula's potential primary open spaces, and any development needs to preserve that feeling of open, as we heard it, lowercase d, democratic space. So I think a lot of people had the fear that, any kind of additional development would come in, potentially start chopping up space, it becomes privatized. I think no matter the use, our clearest conclusion, we need to do it in a way where we're subservient to this sort of historical context. We're not competing with it, and we're preserving this public open space quality for the long run. To that, we've talked primacy of the landscape, low profile, low density buildings. So pass this off to Dave Hoffman here for this next little piece.
Gotcha. Thanks guys for having us here. We really appreciate the opportunity to introduce ourselves and kind of get this project in front of you guys. The main reason for wanting to have this meeting was to introduce ourselves and kind of establish who we are, and that we're starting down a process of taking this very seriously in terms of respecting this site for how valuable it is to the community. Just to give you a sense of where we're at this point, we're not at a stage where we can like show you guys drawings of buildings and things like that. This is really more of a spot for us to get some good feedback from you about where our heads are at right now. But in terms of the process, we've spent the last couple weeks reaching out to local groups, municipal, community, otherwise, and just talking to folks and asking them what's really important about the fort to them. And then at the end of that process, we did the same interview with our client, the developer who purchased the land. And what we heard from him is that the reason that he was attracted to this piece of land and the reason he wanted to buy this in the first place is because he saw a beautiful building that needed to be saved. And having worked for him for a number of years out here in Denver, I can attest to that. That's a genuine sentiment. Further, and Joanna, if you could go to the next slide here. When we sat down with him and told him that the community and the historic value of this space is really kind of sacred in this community, and that one of the best things you could possibly do in terms of like an adaptive reuse to the post hospital and the grounds around it would be to change it as little as possible. And that's exactly what he wants to do, and that's exactly what we're going to propose moving forward here. If you look at this map here, there's kind of this imaginary line between the kind of green, like manicured area around the post hospital, and then this brown zone to the left of it, brown zone for lack of a better word. The current thought for how we're going to develop this is that the post hospital and all the grounds around it are going to stay as true to their historical nature as they possibly can. So what does that mean in terms of a building? Well, what we're thinking right now is that the second and third floor of the building probably become something like office suites. Office suites, because that's a pretty established use in this area. And because it will require like really the smallest amount of renovation to get that building to a point where it could be leased out for offices. We won't have to even really like, the current thinking is we're not even really going to change the internal organization. We're going to leave as much of it as we can and just convert those spaces to rentable offices. And then on the ground floor, what we are thinking at this point is that would benefit from having a much more public facing component. This is a key part of the history of the fort, and we want to program it in a way that it's accessible to the public and that people can come in here and interact with it and see this building. You know, what that could actually look like is maybe like some small cafes, perhaps a restaurant, something like that. Something that kind of contributes to its function as a piece of like the whole historic experience. It's not something private that people can't go into. It's a public space that everyone's meant to kind of come into and experience. You know, we've talked about working with Matt and Kate to kind of curate that a little bit, to make it sort of like a part of like the walking tour of Fort Missoula, the spot you go get lunch after you've gone to the museum, things like that. But generally speaking, our idea and what we really want to do here is preserve that hospital building intact as much as we possibly can. We're not talking about doing like any additions to it at this point. In so much as we can. I mean, if we have to add like an elevator for code reasons, that's a conversation we can have. But the idea is to touch it like as little as we possibly can, really, and just restore it to kind of its like its kind of former glory and to a condition that's befitting of a building that's got this much history in it. The second part of this is what we're looking at doing to this sort of brown patch off to the left side on this page of the post hospital. A renovation of the building is going to be fairly costly, and as a way to make this work and make this pencil, we're looking at developing that section. I don't know if the brown line is actually like a real property line or anything like that, but it's kind of been like a reference point we've been using. And when I say develop, I mean very low density, respectful of the scale and proportion of things that are going around it, deferential to the hospital, in the sense that, you know, we're not making anything bigger or prouder or louder than the hospital. We also wouldn't be trying to do like a carbon copy of it. Appendix A talks about this a lot, and I completely agree with it, that it's not really appropriate to try to copy an older building to make this kind of a pseudo older building. So the development we'd be putting in there would be this smaller scale, low density series of buildings that are respectful of the context around them. And the uses we're considering at this point are some light commercial restaurant, you know, again, like single story, and then a residential piece that kind of pushes up against the backside of the site. Yeah, I mean, with that, I think unless anyone else from Trace Birds or Jamie wanted to add something to that, I think I really wanted to just kind of open it up to the whole group here to hear your guys' thoughts and yeah, just kind of any helpful insight you can give us at this point.
Yeah, this is
all right. Thank you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say thank you very much for the presentation. I was going to open it up to the board or the commission. And Kent, if you'd like to begin, please.
Thank you. So has the developer acquired that property to the west? Because that has been a separate ownership, part of the Child Development Center property. And the latest cadastral shows it's still being under their wing. So I'm just curious, is that now completed as a sale to the developer?
I think Jamie could really weigh in on that one if she's still on here.
Yeah, that sale has been completed. They did a boundary line relocation with Child Development Center, so that's been completed.
So what is the acreage? How much additional acreage do you have there? How close do you come to the? I'm looking at the image both on your map and as well as on Google Earth. I have my workstation up and running right now, so I'm looking at both sites.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, there you go. Thank you. So that'll be the full site there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And since I'm the landscape architect on the commission, are you working with, do you have your own landscape architect, or are you working with Kate Dinsmore at WGM, or what's your plans in that regard?
We haven't gotten that deep into the process yet. I mean, I think we're at a point where we've identified the landscaping as something that's absolutely critical to the character of this place, and we've kind of established an intention to preserve it as much as possible. Yeah, but we don't have like a professional landscape architect kind of looking at this point. I would say that that's definitely something we're going to be doing as we develop this a little further.
Yeah, I think Kate will be involved from WGM.
Okay, yeah, I would encourage that you get her on board soon, because she can help you with these decisions relative to site planning and so forth, in addition to landscaping. That's just a small function of what we do as professionals.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a rich history, and you mentioned kind of the what do you say, the quiet history or the invisible history. There's a lot more history to look at that might give you some more inspiration too. For instance, the officers club that was in that green space right across the road out front of the hospital building. I don't know if you've looked at the Japanese internment camp history at all. I know that from the museum's point of view, which is now an active member of the, and I forget the acronym, but it's the Association of Japanese Internment Sites nationally. And this is still one of the most intact, if not the most intact, Japanese internment site from World War II left in the country. So there's some history there that would be nice to tie into, and interpretation of that covers basically the whole core of the fort, and a little more to the east. And specifically, if you want to get down to like brass tacks, there's so much detail out there that you can look at. We had a discussion years ago about trying to interpret the site and bringing back the fence around the internment camp. And practically, there's no way you can actually put the fence up again. That is kind of anathema to how the fort is used. But we were looking at putting up just the fence posts as a demarcation of how much of that site was internment camp, because it's kind of surprising to some people how much was included in the internment camp in the day. So if you look at maybe some historic maps, but there are out in that lot to the west of the hospital building, I know you can still find the post bases, the concrete that the posts were set in for the perimeter. So, looking at, well, it's no in the land that is part of the immediately to the west of there. So it's the brown grass and in the green grass. And so if that's something that, like I said, that kind of gets down into nitty gritty detail. It's not so conceptual, but if some of that is kind of the color that you guys would like to investigate, to look at, there's a lot of it out there. And I know pretty much everybody involved would love to, clue you in if you feel like you need an introduction to some of that. And there would be a lot of people to talk to. So from the conceptual down to the, nitty gritty little detail, I think there's a lot of potential there. And to include interpretation in what you do, and make it part of, hopefully, interpretation of the overall core of the fort. But that's just an introduction. There's a lot you can talk about there, and there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of variety. So what you want to pull from, and what you find intriguing, and what you find works for you guys to pull from the history, there's a lot there. I encourage you to dig into it. And I, for one, and I'm sure Matt and people at the Historic Museum would be happy to just sit down and talk history too, so that you get a sense of what's out there.
I think that will be very important. But one of the commitments we have from the developer, understanding that this is private development, that we still need to invite the public all the way into the site. And part of the ways that we're potentially going to be able to do that are these, whether it's, interpretation or it's just highlighting, or, I think you're right, that it is the nitty gritty. And as we further develop that, that's where we'll get into this. But we have a great opportunity having this developer who is committed to doing that sort of thing and is going to be looking for that kind of input to figure out what that community public engagement portion of this will be.
Well, I certainly applaud your efforts to keep it public in nature, even though its ownership is private, to keep the public coming into the site, being involved with the buildings and the functions there. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Great comments. Anyone else want to chime in?
Oh, I wanted to just second what Steve said. I was going to say a similar thing, that this is the hospital was active during the internment camp. It served the internment camp for both Italian and Japanese alien prisoners there. And I think some sort of way of acknowledging that it's pretty important part of Missoula's history and our national history too. So, and I was also curious, like, if you guys had a sense of how many residences you were thinking of you could build on that piece of land.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're very early in the process, but one of the ideas that's kind of sticking out right now is, kind of along the south property line there. Just kind of limited to that sort of brown grass patch. So we're leaving like a pretty healthy buffer between anything we do and the post hotel or hospital. But we're currently looking at, somewhere in the ballpark of like 15 to 20 kind of like townhousey sort of things. So yeah, not like, we're certainly not talking about like a 4-story condo building or something like that. This is all low rise. It's pushed up against like the southern extent of the fort, really. Yeah, we're definitely committed to sort of detailing this and scaling this in a way that's respectful and sort of protective of the historic grounds of the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a place that historically has had a lot of open space, but also a place that has housed a lot of people. So I don't think it's totally inappropriate to as you're saying, put in something respectful, but put in some density in terms of the housing.
Have you been inside the hospital building itself? What sort of condition is that in?
I haven't personally. Our principal went and toured it a number of months ago. We've certainly seen worse. I mean, these adaptive like reuses are sort of like our bread and butter. We kind of really enjoy getting into some like very decrepit spaces and kind of making them useful again. The pictures I've seen about what's going on the inside, I mean, it's an all concrete building. There's services, MEP, that's obviously going to need to be probably completely retrofitted, but from like a structural and finishes standpoint, it's certainly not in terrible shape.
I'm pretty excited.
Even like the third floor. Sorry.
Oh, I'm just really happy to hear that you want to keep the exterior as is, for lack of a better term. I know some things will have to change, but that's pretty reassuring, especially with all the work that the Forest Service has done out there.
I think even the way we're talking about the interior, there's the chance for preservation and restoration in there. I think the third floor in particular, we've heard from multiple people that there's some pretty spectacular tile work up in that level. So, as Dave said, the way we're thinking about potentially doing some office space on levels 2 and 3 of that building, part of that decision for that use is this not having to gut this building. You know, we heard the exterior is the most important, but the less major construction we can do in the interior, the better off we're going to be as well. And that's why office space felt like it was going to kind of be what the building wants, at least for levels 2 and 3.
And it's been many years since I've been inside of it, but I seem to recall there being like a very sterile, tiled up surgery room or surgery suite there. Is that still in there? Because that would be kind of a fun macabre thing to keep and maintain some public access to. I think it was on the main floor in the back wing, but not trusting my memory a whole lot now. But I like the idea that if there's spaces of character in there, that you can keep the character and turn it to a good use that would appreciate that character. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's something that just we as a design team love doing. And some of the precedent projects we showed you in the beginning, we took an elevator shaft and turned it into like the entrance of the building, preserving all like the old like mechanical pieces to it. An old rag baler that was just like the giant piece of equipment left over in this building. And we kind of integrated it into like the main stair core experience. Yeah, we found like an old surgery room or something like that. That's the kind of thing we get excited about. And like,
I don't know if it's still there, because like I said, it's been decades since I've been inside the building, but it would be great to take a tour sometime if that were possible too. And just, you know, wave hands and talk possibilities, and that's the fun part. So,
So I'm sorry to interject. This is Paul, and I have to sign out. I have another meeting I'm going to go to, so I just want to coordinate with staff to switch the meeting over to, I believe Jim's going to take over.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you all, and I'm going to see you next month. And thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'll take over. I just wanted to say I was in the building about a year ago with another group who was looking at it at that time. And the first floor had already been pretty much remodeled into offices and spaces for the mental health center. There's not necessarily walls taken out, but new walls put in to create smaller spaces. So the upper 2 floors, of course, were completely, they weren't even used, so they haven't changed at all. And there's some large open spaces on the upper floors that you can do a lot of things with. So, but I really appreciate your comments on the building itself and the landscaping. Not sure about the additional units as far as I guess it'd be single family condos or something, or whatever it be, townhouses, whatever it might be. But I think if it's done well, there's some potential. But that's something that's going to have to be looked at as you move along here. So, but appreciate your presentation. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions?
I was just mulling over what you were talking about, say 15 units or so, and suddenly that's sounding like Officers Row. And if you look at Officers Row, and if you look at any photographs or evidence of the old Officers Row, which is just to the west of the headquarters building, that might give some inspiration too, because if you can pick up on some of the elements in the rhythm and the scale that those have, that may be appropriate. The original Officers Row does not exist anymore, but looking at some of the record, maybe a little more human scale than the current Officers Row.
I will say
Anyone
quickly,
else?
the Officers Row buildings, those are quite a bit bigger footprint wise, I believe, than what we'd be talking about. So we are really trying to have these kind of low scale, low density, And just so you guys know, our next step in our process, we're trying to land at some different site plans that we can take back out to the 15 or so groups that we talked to. And before we go in for the actual PUD submittal, we're going to try to elicit a second round of feedback from everybody. And our hope is there's some things that we haven't thought about, good ideas, suggestions, sort of the things you're bringing to the table here, Steve, that can enrich that plan before we actually get it to the PUD stage of this.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Jim, can I just?
Anybody else? Go ahead.
This is Lavelle. And I wanted to just appreciate the discussion that all the commission members are having here. The agenda had mentioned that you were looking for, you know, what do they see as appropriate and functional future uses for the hospital or the site? And so maybe, you know, in that vein, how do you think they're doing in terms of identifying and thinking about these uses? That would be something to be considering and commenting on. And I would just say over to Trey Bird that you have a resource here with the HPC and the skills that that is on the board. Several of the members are very familiar with the fort and the fort's history. When you go through another round of your stakeholder discussions, I'd welcome you back to the HPC for, you know, either including them in that stakeholder or providing them with the summary of what you're hearing. And, you know, this could be an iterative process with them as well to some degree. So just, you know, you're welcome to continue that discussion with the HPC from their expert backgrounds.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, and we'll definitely be reaching out. We're at least going to be reaching out to you and Jen again to kind of show you guys when we get some drawings done. Thanks, we appreciate that.
Yeah, I think we'll welcome the opportunity to be back. That'd be fantastic for us.
I had another question. Whom have you been in contact with at the university? Who's your main connection at the University of Montana?
Let's see. Got my list up here. We were speaking to Dave Kuntz and Marilyn Marler because she's also involved with the city. Yeah.
Okay, good. I was going to make sure you were in touch with Marilyn because she's. I did some work with the Clark Fork Coalition and Audubon and so forth. We were looking at the Knife River Ponds a year or so ago, and this was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting in your introduction. The Knife River Ponds are now city property, and so there's going to be some active planning going on there. But right next to your property, to your acquisition, is the native plant garden, and I just wanted to make sure you're in touch with Marilyn because she's the one that manages all that. Yeah, that's the one for sure. So good. I'm glad you're in touch with her.
Yeah, she gave us a pretty good tour of all the surrounding landowners and what's going on with all those spaces. So it was really helpful.
Good.
Anybody else?
Oh, and I'm wondering if we can be available between meetings as well as a resource, because that's our mission, but I don't want to run afoul of any open meeting laws or anything. So I'd like to invite you guys to give us a call, whoever you think might help you out as commission members in between time, because I know a lot happens between meetings, and meetings are kind of limited as well as to how much you can achieve during meetings. So especially if you want to get into the history of things or find out who to talk to, I think consider us all a resource in the meantime. And feel free to call. And if you need some guidance, input, list of other people to talk to and resources out there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very appreciated.
Do
Okay.
you want to ask some of those questions we had?
Well, I don't know how much more time you guys have and what else is on your agenda. We're going to be submitting a PUD. And so I don't know if there's any feedback you can give us at this point, or maybe this is for like a future review. But just as we're laying stuff out, things like setbacks and parking requirements and sort of maybe even thinking about the uses that we've talked about today. If there's anything, because with a PUD, we're going to be a little bit making up our own rules. So I don't know, for office space, our thought for parking has been to just try to respect the city's standards for parking. If we're proposing some restaurant space, try to respect those standards. But if there's anything that seems really critical, so like talking about putting some of these townhomes right up against the southern property line, we feel like that's appropriate because it's kind of pushing that as far back as possible. But if you guys see reason that there's some sort of setback rules we need to be following, that would potentially help us immediately. We also don't want to take up more of your time than you have today. So this could be the type of thing where we're maybe doing this offline over the coming week or two.
Yeah.
Where were you planning on putting some of the parking? Just because, so I work for the Forest Service and I don't work at this site, but I know about some of the parking issues that we have out there, and that's just with our normal staff and normal crews. So if you're thinking about putting residential out there or restaurants or whatnot, where is everybody going to park?
So yeah, I mean, the quick answer is our commitment is to not be touching the grounds of the irrigated space, let's say it. So when we're saying we feel like we can fit 15 or so for sale townhomes, we feel like we can fit a few restaurants, we think we can, within that space, that same, call it the brown space for now, we can fit those functions in a low density kind of way, have the parking required for it, and also have some leftover green space that, we can sort of start to have some interactive outdoor space that's in addition to what we're preserving at the hospital. The way that actually lays out on the space is what we're working through with the developer right now, and we'll be bringing to the stakeholders over the coming weeks. But we feel like, yeah, it's that 15 to 18 townhomes, maybe 10,000 square feet of commercial. And then I think, Joanna, what we're able to lay out anywhere between 40 and 55 parking stalls.
Yeah.
While adding to the open green space in addition to that. So we feel like on that brown parcel, it's deceptively large in what you can do with it in a low density sort of way.
Well, I'm looking at I think it was the tank maintenance shed with that huge parking lot, which is to the east of the hospital building.
D150.
Yeah, that, and looking at if you can gain access or get a use agreement or shared parking or something, because having been active out at the fort for many years, parking is an issue, but new surface parking is also a big deal out there. And so if you can make use of something that's out there already, that would be far preferable to creating new parking lots, parking areas. And then of course, looking at, if you are creating new parking, to do it innovatively and how to make it as kind of little impact on the historic as possible.
That's what I was about to say is we're not showing something, so it's often easy to go to what maybe the worst potential version of surface parking is. not like a huge consolidated lot. And part of what works from a use perspective is getting some of these for sale townhomes. That parking actually happens, in that townhome. So we're just talking about some parking that we feel can be artistically and kind of beautifully integrated into the additional green space that we're talking about being able to bring onto that site.
Kathy, did you have thoughts on that parking lot to the east?
Yeah, the Forest Service is working on that.
You are working on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, building T-150 is the Forest Service. They have some thoughts about that development, and I don't believe that that's going to be available to anybody else. However, I'm not speaking for the Forest Service. This is just what I've heard.
Okay, good to know.
And I do believe that my supervisor is on your stakeholder panel, Corey Kegel.
Mhm.
And that brown area between the CDC and the post hospital, that's about 1.5 acres.
Yeah, and on the parking issue, I mean, we've found a way to park the uses we're talking about doing. I think we can make it work, but less parking is more open space, and less surface parking lots. Even if we do them really well, it'd be better to have less parking. And as you guys are going to be, part of the group that like approves this historic preservation permit, is there any leeway in terms of like not hitting like the current Missoula zoning parking requirements, but writing our own PUD here that are like, lower, but reasonably lower and done in the name of like preserving more open space? Is that like an argument that would have legs here, or?
There is. The Historic Preservation Commission does have the ability to, it's not a variance, but to allow less parking, and in the interest of historic preservation. So we can mitigate the amount of parking if there's a reason historically, and you're in a historic district, it's the fort. I think it's kind of a no-brainer to look at that. And the board does have that ability within the city to help mitigate the amount of parking required.
Okay, cool. That's good to know.
I think Mountain Lion is also expanding their hours and things too for even this area, I believe, from what I've heard. I haven't seen the new plans, but to bring more bus service out there into later times. I don't know if someone else can respond to that, but that's what I've heard lately. Anything else by anybody? Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Oh, go ahead.
If I could just have one quick question before you guys wrap up. There's a building, this little shed to the south and a little bit east. That has been described to me as being in very poor shape. It is listed in the 2012 update to the register as a contributing building. I'm wondering what you guys think about that, like as a structure, as like its importance to the overall site. I think our prerogative is generally to try to save it, but like there's not a ton we can really do with it. I'm just wondering how important that is to the overall site.
I don't know. I can't remember. It was a garage, right?
It was garages originally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even if it stays garages, because parking will be a necessity out there, I think it's important. It's not one of the primary buildings, but one thing that preservation teaches us is that the unsung buildings usually disappear, and then people find themselves suddenly aware that there are so few of them left, and then they become important later on. So I'd like to be proactive about being able to use the unsung buildings as well, because that contributes to the flavor building by building, and even the little ones contribute to the flavor and the aura out there. Because if you look at preservation of larger areas and realize that, gosh, all those larger areas did need support buildings and support functions. Where did the support stuff go? It's nice if we can keep it there to show that, yeah, it was there and it's still there.
All right, yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate your time and the opportunity here to talk with you.
Yeah, and thank you for the presentation. And
thank you.
Feel free to stay on if you want, but if you need to go, that's fine too. So.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, to get back to the agenda, let's see, where are we at? Oh, the CLG grant draft review. We need to approve that so that it can be sent in by the 12th. And I think everybody needs to get their hours in from September to tonight, probably as part of that report. So if you don't have a form, is that correct, Jen?
Lavelle is shaking her head that no, we don't actually need those forms. No, we don't. I remember. We don't actually need those forms just yet. We're just applying for the grant itself.
And then
Okay, I thought we did. Okay.
Final report on the last grant isn't until the spring, like maybe March, something like that.
Okay.
Grant
Okay. All right.
So Jen, do you need our hours now just to get into that report, or I sat down and finally told you?
No, I think we're good for right now.
But keep your hours up if you would, so we don't get behind when we need them in the end of March or sometime there. So, all right. So anyway, did everybody look at the grant draft? It was sent out. Everybody get it? Should have got it a couple days ago. So,
Jen has a brief presentation to go with the CLG grant application.
Okay.
And then
okay,
you
great.
the attachment of the grant application itself and the older preservation plan. It's updated as of 2018. But yeah, the focus right here is the grant application, your support of it, and us being able to turn it around and submit it to SHPO with signatures. So great. Jen has a brief presentation.
Okay.
Okay. So as we've said, let's see, I better share my screen so you can see what I'm doing. All right, I have to ask the question, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So as we said, it's that time of year again when the Historic Preservation Office applies to get grant funding as a CLG or a certified local government. And this grant helps financially support the local historic preservation officer, as well as the preservation work that you all do. For some reason, my words are off from my screen, so my apologies. I need to, my notes and my thing do not combine. Let's see. Okay, so sorry about that. You guys, which are you seeing? You're seeing the 2021, 22?
Schedule,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. All right, my apologies. I'm a little confused with my new technology. Let's try this. So last year we applied for $5,500 and received $6,000. So this year we're applying for that maximum amount of $6,000 again. And the National Park Service is required to pass on at least 10% of their annual funding to certified local governments such as us. And this year they've allocated just over $87,800, which is about $6,000 more than last year. So last year, funds were announced on January 8th. This year, funds were announced on December 23rd. The grant is due on February 12th, which is why we're here with you tonight. And we should hear back regarding the approval of our application by March. April is when the funding cycle begins. And as a note, each entity, federal, state, and local, have different fiscal year cycles, which can make it complicated. So the CLG cycle is in March, and then the city's budget is in July. The grant application is the same as in years prior, and it requires all contact information, scope of work, detailed budget numbers, sources of revenue and funding, and then of course signatures from the HPC chair, the mayor, and the historic preservation officer. It also requires a list of commission members and contact information for each member, including phone number, email, and address. And then along with the resumes of any new members and the most current version of the preservation plan. So all those will be attached when we send it in. And just like last year, the work plan for the historic preservation officer will include education, programming, identification and documentation, as well as ordinance and code updates. We've done a little narrowing of the work plan to given that we are currently recruiting for a new historic preservation officer because of the pandemic. This year's goals for the HPC are similar to last year as well, with the list of items remaining general at this point again until we have a new historic preservation officer to help with implementing new ideas. This is our budget for the coming year, very similar to last year, the total being $7,627 for the total year. And that is what the city puts into the historic preservation program. That's the application. We need to present it to you for your review. We need a motion to approve the application so I can send it into the state. And then as Laval said, the application can be found linked to tonight's agenda. And we'll also have a copy of tonight's minutes attached to the application showing that it was discussed and approved by you all.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Somebody like to make a motion, then we can open it up to discussion if need to.
So moved.
Okay. So move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, Leaf? Okay, all right. Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any questions?
Noting at that photo of Higgins with Yellowstone photo is what, 10, 15 years old?
I was noticing that too.
That's a historic photo, Kent.
Now, if there are no other questions or comments, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Sounds like it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I make one note, Jim?
I'm sorry?
Can I just make one note, just for the
Oh,
record?
sure.
Paul had mentioned that the preservation plan that was attached needed to be updated, and we will make that change. He pointed out that the entity that we were referring to as Montana Preservation Alliance is renamed to Preserve Montana. So we'll just be making that change to the current preservation plan that we have. We'll probably still keep it dated as 2018. And we all know that we want to update it in general anyway with the work of a new preservation officer, but I'll just make that change. Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
all right. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is Preservation Month. We're already behind if we're going to do anything, but I think we're going to have to really think about it this year, whether we're going to be able to do any tours or anything like that. I'm going to have to back off a little bit here just because of health reasons for probably another 6 to 8 months here. So probably won't be able to do a lot, but we're hoping that the Downtown Association and their tours are going to continue throughout the summer. Is there anything else that we want to do, the Legacy Awards or anything else? Has anybody got any ideas that how we should move ahead? We can get the banners up. The unfortunate part is that where we had them last year on both ends of the bridge is probably not going to be ideal this year, and they're not going to let us put them up on the bridge at all. We'll have to move our banners if we'd like to a different location. I'll have to talk with Preserve Missoula and see if they're still interested in supporting that, and I haven't been able to do it yet, but I'll do that this next week. But that's probably all we're going to be able to do this year until we get a new preservation officer on board and can start planning a little bit better for the coming years here, if that's okay with everyone.
Jim, did Kalina get in touch with you from the Downtown Missoula Partnership?
She got with, yes, just to what they were going to do. Yeah. But we haven't had an actual meeting yet. Yeah.
I had an idea potentially, and being new to the commission, I don't know if this is something that would necessarily qualify or be appropriate for a Preservation Month project. But after looking over the historic preservation plan and kind of seeing some of the commission's goals to make the resources associated with historic preservation, things like the historical surveys that are being generated through the historic preservation process, potentially finding a way to make that more accessible and some sort of online platform to the public. It's kind of what got me thinking about this, working for the county. We have this a website called Map Missoula, where we've worked with various organizations like the University Archives, the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula. And what we've done is geotagged various historic photographs, oral histories, and other things like that on a GIS platform. And I think it would be interesting if we could potentially maybe build upon the
You just cut out.
You cut out, yeah. Patrick, yeah, cut away for some reason.
You're still frozen, Patrick. Uh-oh.
I thought everybody younger than me would run this better.
Kathy.
Apologize.
My
internet.
Are you there?
Hey, there you
Oh,
go.
there you are.
I'm not sure where did I cut out there. My internet's been giving me a little bit of trouble tonight.
Yeah.
You were talking about the county over mapping thing of historic sites.
The Map Missoula website.
Yeah, so thinking kind of in a similar vein as that, potentially building upon the inventory map that we have of National Register places, potentially building a layer where we could house current documents and correspondence of either ongoing historic preservation projects or past projects, and it could be accessible to the public. So they could have kind of more of an intimate look into what's going on with the commission and historic preservation in general in Missoula.
That would be pretty fabulous.
Yeah.
Do you have maybe an estimate of the amount of time? Is there something that we can do a subcommittee and get going on this? Because I think we're probably going to be faced with, we're going to have something online this year.
Right. So It kind of depends. I don't know who on the city side maintains that GIS platform, but what we've done at the county has been kind of, we're calling it like a crowdsourced community archive. So I could work with our office and build a layer, and essentially I'd be willing to volunteer time as long as I have access to the various documents we want included. I could take the time to upload that onto that platform. And then we could create a link that we could put on the historic preservation webpage that anybody could click on, and it could open up to that platform.
What can we help you with? Those of us that are
so-
not so good at computers.
I guess I don't necessarily know what materials we have and where they're stored. So basically getting access to what we'd want to present would be what I would need help with. And then obviously input on how we would like to, I guess, unveil this for Preservation Month, more kind of that outreach and letting the public know that it could be a potential resource.
Patrick, you know, there's this a map, an interactive map of the historic property inventory map on the historic preservation page. So you're thinking of doing something more than that, like adding more information to something like that?
Yeah, essentially creating the same style of platform, but just adding an additional layer where we could have geotagged ongoing projects or past projects, and we could upload, like, for example, one thing that I was thinking about was the 4th Street condo development and the presentation we had last month that had the documentation of various architectural and design features. And like, because those buildings are going to be taken away, I think it would be really cool to document those changes in the built environment and to have an interactive map where you could click on that structure and see what was there before, as opposed to what's there now.
So Patrick, the map that you are referring to that's already in place, is that available now for us to look at?
Yeah, it's live on the county website. And I don't know if I have access to screen share, but I could pull it up and kind of just walk you through what's on there now and kind of how it looks.
Oh, okay, so it's accessible through the county website. It doesn't have its own standalone address.
You can get to it through a standalone address. It's mapmissoula.us, I believe.
Do you want
Hey, there it is.
Patrick to bring it up on the screen here? Or-
Yeah.
While you're doing that, one thing that kind of comes to mind, and it's for me, and it's also related to preservation awards and recognition, is a few years ago, there was some interest in trying to create a log of the what
The past winners?
yeah, what has been recognized in the past. And, you know, and really kind of just dig through the history of all of that, which projects were recognized, how long we've been doing this. Are we past 25 into 30 years now? I can't remember. But, you know, kind of dig back through all of that. And maybe that could be also geolocated and pinpointed and associated with the year of an award. You know, you could actually state what year that was recognized.
That'd be pretty valuable, just not only for the public, but for us. And with the businesses we recognized last year, that would be pretty nice too.
Yeah, that program added as well, sort of like 2 pins that could be related to this recognition. Of course, there's people recognitions and things too, but it would at least get you the places.
That's one of the problems we seem to have had, Emmy, and I look for a lot of those things over the years, and we haven't been able to go too far back. However, I did get all of Alan Matthews' slides from the time he was part of it, and I found at least the awards for 99, 2000, and 2001 and 2, I believe. So but that's all we have right now. There's a lot of gaps in between there that for some reason we don't have all that information at the city. It just somehow disappeared, and I don't know what happened there.
Well, we can always put a question out there too on the website. This is what we have. What else do you know?
Yeah, no, that'd be good. Yeah.
So Patrick, I'm on the county website now and I can't seem to find the, there's so many maps that pop up when you do that. Maybe if you could just send us the link so we can get to it without having to find all the options.
This is through the Missoula County property search.
Yeah, it's built on the same fabric as the property information system.
Right.
Essentially, we created a layer that we're calling Map Missoula, and there's a bunch of different themes within that. Like I said, I don't know if I have the ability to screen share on here. I'm not seeing that, but
So,
how about if we, if you wouldn't mind, is maybe we can put on the agenda for first part of March and have a presentation. And
Definitely.
In the meantime, we'll see if we can find some information too from the city and whatever else we can find, and see how that might be incorporated into something like this.
Sure. Yeah, I think that would be great.
Just real quick, when you open up the Missoula County properties search and you get that aerial of Missoula, off on the left-hand side is a little icon that shows a little globe. And if you click on that, it'll open up the whole menu, and Map Missoula is on there under layers. So click on the little globe to the left, menu will slide out, and then Map Missoula is on there, and you can play with all the layers. The Sanborn maps are on there. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say it's not the most user-friendly platform. It's pretty new and we're still working on that. But once you get in there and start playing with the various layers, it's pretty interesting. You can overlay, like Steve was saying, the old Sanborn fire insurance maps over an aerial image of Missoula County, and you can adjust transparency so you can see what's there now versus what was there before. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting platform.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, and I just inadvertently clicked on, click on the globe and play with the various layers and click on the properties. I just inadvertently clicked on Central School, the MCT, and up came a picture of a photograph of the original Central School. Like, yahoo! So it's good stuff.
And Patrick, if you need some help between now and your presentation, sing out.
Definitely. I'll be sending out some emails just if I can get maybe access to some resources and stuff. I've only been on the email chain here for a couple of months now, or I guess a little over a month. So that would be helpful.
And we can coordinate through Jen and I also. If you, probably the March would be about as much time to take all this in. But if there's a need for a meeting, let me know and we can host it.
Okay.
So you don't have to go through subcommittee kind of processes. So.
I was thinking at least for next month, if we put that on the agenda, maybe I could just go through and show the various layers that we have now, what we've done so far, and talk about the functionality and potentially how the resources we have here at the commission could be incorporated into this type of platform.
Okay.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments?
Good work.
Anything else as far as Preservation Month? No? All right. Let's go on with the agenda. Old Business Historic Covenants Subcommittee. I don't think the committee has met, so and also with the Preservation Planning Subcommittee. We're going to wait until the new preservation officer is on board before we get that going again. Okay. All right. Staff report. Jen, do you have a staff
I do have a
report?
very short staff report, mostly
fine.
general topics tonight. So as you probably know, Jamie Ryan Lockman recently informed us that she's stepping down from the HPC. Her professional work was taking on broader dimensions, and we wanted to say we absolutely appreciate her service to the HPC and her commitment to cultural management and historic preservation in Missoula and Missoula County. She stepped up to chair the HPC and brought a valued perspective to many ideas and issues related to the commission. She merged her love of preservation and professional background with knowledge of agriculture to help carry the interests of the HPC into various projects, especially things like the Lalonde Ranch. And we hope to see her continue that interest in any volunteer roles that's possible. A second position on the committee was opened. The city expanded the recruitment to include her position. We're now looking for one at-large member and one alternate 2 member. And recruitment for the 2 HPC positions was supposed to close January 29th, and we'll let you know as soon as we have any new members to share with you. Recruitment for the vacant HPO position is ongoing, and just so you know, Jim McDonald is participating in those interviews. And then the last thing I have is that there hasn't been any historic permits requested. However, the Hammond building, I told you last time we were waiting for some information to be given to us to be reviewed, and I now have that information but haven't looked at it just yet. So I'll be looking at that proposal in the next few days. And that's the end of the staff report.
And Lavelle here again. It does look like they're going to be interviewing for the HPC couple extra, the 2 other positions on the 10th of February. So might be welcoming some new members by our March meeting.
Okay, great. All right. Is that it, Jen? Yeah, sorry. Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it, and appreciate those comments from Jamie too. That was very nice. Let's see. Anything else? Board member comments? I just wanted to say one thing. If you saw the preservation grants that the legislature has gone through, they had the hearings a week or so ago. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like any of the Missoula projects are going to get funded this year. We don't know what's happened when they'll start a new round of projects, but the 2 projects, the Hammond Arcade and the, it's the one in the Milwaukee Depot, the
Rocky Mountain Elk?
Rocky Mountain, no, not the Rocky Mountain Elk. What?
Big Rocket? Was that?
I'm sorry?
The Boone and Crockett?
Boone and Crockett, yes. It looks like those projects didn't get funded by the preservation grants. So, and I don't know if there are others too, but it looked pretty thin. There was too many large grants of 500,000 across the state that appear to be getting funded, which limited from, I think there was 80 some applications down to maybe 18 projects. So it cut out quite a few this first year. So, well, and it hasn't been finalized yet too. There may be some politics and things will change, but it didn't look good for any of the projects here in Missoula. So anyway, so we'll see what happens. Any other board comments? Ken?
Yeah, Jim, couple things. I've just came on just a year ago and learned a lot of new things very quickly. And one of the things I discovered, and I'm embarrassed almost to admit this, but that the Downtown Heritage Interpretive Plan had been crafted during 2019 and was approved last January. And I am technically your representative from this commission on that activity. And I've been involved with Kalina and a number of people that were involved in putting that plan together on the interpretation aspect of that plan. One of the things I'm curious about, which I discovered on my own as I read the plan. Let me back up for just a second. Which of you board members that are part of the commission now participated in that activity, or was it just strictly Emmy? Emmy and I had a number of conversations about it during the summer, but I was just kind of curious if any of the commission members were involved in the preparation of that plan, or did you have a chance to review it while it was being produced and so forth?
Not that I know of, it was just Emily mainly, and she kept us informed at every meeting. And
okay.
she made comments.
One of the things, one of the things that I discovered in sitting down reading the plan, from back all the way through, is there wasn't hardly any mention of the importance of the railroads coming into Missoula. There's a passing reference, and I'm in kind of an awkward position because I don't want to, stir the pot and upset people that spent so much time working on it. But on the other hand, I think the history of the Northern Pacific entering Missoula in June of 1883 was one of the most, seminal pieces of Missoula history, and it's just barely mentioned in that plan. So I just saw that concern out there for you all to think about, and if you can. And also the other thing is there's not even a mention of the Milwaukee Road. There's a reference to the station, which is now better known by most people as the Boone and Crockett headquarters. But so that was one aspect of this whole plan. I mean, it's an amazing plan. There's a lot of stuff in there, really good stuff, and the interpretation, the Heritage Trail, and there's all those kind of things that are in there are very well done. But I just didn't, when I sat down and read it, discovered that the arrival of the Northern Pacific is just given one sentence in the introduction, and that's the extent of it. So, and I don't know what to do, and I'm not asking for any feedback right now, but you might think about it. If you have a chance, go online to the Missoula Downtown website, and I think Emmy did put it on our website finally during the summer so that you could access it.
Yes.
Look at it and see what you think. So, I don't need any feedback right now. The other thing came up that's more interesting in terms of our mission is I discovered an endangered building that maybe some of you know about. It's apparently a spring house at the corner of Mountain View Drive and Woodland Avenue. Mountain View Drive is that street that gets interrupted as a pathway crossing Rattlesnake Creek between the east side and the west side of the valley. And right at that corner, there's a stone spring house that's juts into the right of way. It's kind of an amazing. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Let me see if I can find it and bring it up on the screen so you guys can see it. But it's pretty amazing to see that. Just kind of sitting there. All right, just a minute. I've got it. That was a mistake. That won't work. Well, let me not even try to do it now, but I just bring that to your attention in case any of you are familiar with that particular building and know anything about it, because it's dry. There's hardly any mortar that was used in building the thing, and it sits kind of at an angle, and it's just into the right of way. So once I figure out how to manipulate the activities on Zoom, I'll either that or I'll send you a link to the pictures I have.
Have you talked to Loken about that, Steve Loken?
Interestingly,
he's been talking about that one for years.
Yeah, I was on a walk with Steve. I was walking him that day because he had that health issue and needed someone to walk with him. So it was on that walk that we came right by that. I took pictures of it, but I'm not too good at figuring out how to get them on this site for you people to look at. But yeah, that's the one.
Okay, because there's another. He called it an ice house. Same thing or different? because there's another ice house way the heck out South Avenue, and kind of the last left off of South Avenue. There's an ice house out there that's still
yeah,
around.
I know the one you're talking about.
And I think there was an ice house on the Prescott property that got torn down. But those are the only three I know about in the county. There are probably more out there, but yeah, it's one of the unsung ones, one of the things nobody seems to bring up. So thank you.
Well, it's we speculated on it being a spring house because and actually Steve didn't mention, Logan didn't mention the idea of it being an ice house. We were talking more about it being a spring house as a structure around probably a cistern or a free-flowing well that was inside the building, but who knows?
Okay.
That's all I have, Jim.
So
Anything
I've been corresponding with Olga Kramer. She had asked about wood windows, and there's an email I'd put together a couple of years ago, and I'd sent it to her, and I didn't know if anybody else wanted it. It's just some pretty basic window restoration information. And so I just want to let you know I'm working on that. I'm more than happy to forward that message to anybody. And I can foresee that this is going to lead to, hey, do you know somebody who can fix windows? And the normal three guys that I recommend have informed me they are retired, and they would like to be retired. And so if anybody hears of a local contractor that's willing to take on little projects like wood windows, I'd just like to know their name.
We're all looking for someone right now.
I know. I know. The problem is when they say they're retired, I'm like, but can you still help me out?
I think in August or whenever it was, I was doing a lot of walking around our neighborhood and walked down on Park Avenue there, or Park Street, excuse me, and to the south. And here's the guy restoring all his windows. And I talked to him about it, and he was able to get one of the tool libraries for restoring windows, and he was doing it all on his house and doing a great job. And Preserve Montana has now funded another toolbox for Missoula, as well as 7 other communities across the state to start having tool libraries for doing windows and all the work. And Mary Webb has been putting that all together and doing a great job. So hopefully we'll get some more toolkits out there and people will start restoring them more, but on their own. But anyway, it was a great work by this gentleman on his house that I guess he had he hadn't just purchased it, but he just finally got enough money to start working on it. So he was doing that and getting all the windows fixed up. So anyway. Anything else as far as members' comments? Any announcements, upcoming events? Not a lot going on yet until we get through. I did get my first shot last Wednesday, so us old guys, we can,
next.
But anyway, anyway, so that's good. But it's going to be a while yet before we're going to be able to do a lot of things. So. Anything else?
One other thing I want to mention. I will check in with Soraya and the office staff about the timing of our next meeting and whether there's thoughts that we'd be moving back to the Thursdays. So watch it this time for whether it's a Wednesday or a Thursday. And then whether we're starting on Thursdays, from there on, just pay attention very carefully to the date when we put that out again. And hopefully we'll know real soon about whether it's going to be on a Wednesday or Thursday going forward. Okay. Thank you.
Actually, I like the Wednesdays a lot better. Thursday was always a problem during the summer. I couldn't go to the downtown events on Thursday nights at first Thursdays. But no, it's fine either way.
Okay, yeah, we are
Okay.
getting this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Jim, for taking over.
Sure. Yeah. I hope you didn't hear. I can hear Paul and his other deal next door here. I hope you weren't hearing all that. Anyway, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye now.
Night.
Bye.